Adam Engst, and the Apple CIDER user group. This is MacVoices. Today's MacVoices is supported by Quip. Better oral health made simple. Go to getquip.com/MacVoices to save $10 on a Quip smart electric toothbrush.
So that's why I was glad the month started early, so we could get Chuck and Adam in before all the announcements came out, and they would be too busy for the next 3 weeks writing stuff.
Oh no, we once those announcements come out, we just kind of sit back and let it wash over us. So.
Yeah. For about 30 seconds, and then
and then we drown. So
Someone asked Jason Snell how long it takes him to do all those charts he does for every analyst call. And he says it's a macro. I push a button, come back in half an hour, it's done.
Oh yeah. We do similar ones, although our charts keep specific to the quarter. And it's all just a matter of getting the data in. You put the data in and then it just regenerates everything. It's some of that stuff's easy, but the announcements, not easy.
Well, and the last announcement at WWDC, we all kept waiting for the hardware announcements, and they never came, and then Tim said goodbye and left.
But new Macs, we want new Macs. Come on.
Yeah.
Come on here.
Well, that's what you get for listening to rumors.
Yeah. Well, now the rumors are saying we might not see any new hardware until next year. And if they do announce the iPhone 13, as expected, it may not ship until October. A lot due to part shortages and manufacturing shortages overseas. Yeah. Still trying to recover from COVID.
Yeah. Well, they definitely, last year, obviously everything was up in the air, and they waited till October to announce the iPhones. So, this year I think they may have had the feeling they should get back on schedule, but chip shortages are hitting everyone. I mean, Apple's doing better than just about anyone out there, and they're still having troubles.
I remember reading somebody had a breakdown of COVID insurance, and in Apple's 10K filing, I think it was last year, they had a COVID insurance clause, and so they got paid extra money for all their shutdown. So it wasn't as big a deal for them to shut down. And then somebody noted that Wimbledon, that was canceled last year, had a COVID clause, and so they didn't lose any money either.
Yes, they had pandemic insurance.
Yeah, which is
who
one of those
thinks to
things,
get pandemic insurance before this?
Well, it happens every 100 years, and the last one was 100 years ago, so we're due, right?
Yeah, right. Just like those 100-year floods that roll around every 5 years now.
Yeah.
Notice that Chuck's sitting in the dark because he's about to get hammered by a thunderstorm. So,
yes.
I just got a tropical storm Midi warning coming up the Gulf Coast. That shouldn't make it this far north.
Yeah, that's what they said about Ida. No.
Yeah.
No, it's been amazing. I've switched to using Carrot Weather on my iPhone, and it does great alerts. But holy cats, there been a lot of them. There's constant flood advisories and severe thunderstorms and tornadoes. Gee.
Adam, can you limit that to a smaller geographic area?
Oh boy. It is just your area. That's the problem. So it's actually one of the things I love about Carrot is it will, I don't think I have a good example of it, but it will say, like the National Weather Service says there's a thunderstorm watch or a warning or whatever for these counties, and Carrot will report that because you're in one of those counties. But they will then modify that alert with their data to say, but you're outside it. So like this one, thunderstorms are rolling through, but they're going to go north of you. You don't have to worry. I mean, you may still get wet, but you're not in the harm's way. So I think that's been. I've actually quite liked that. They don't have the warnings are broad, but they'll narrow it down.
It's the one that's snarky, isn't it?
Yeah, it can be. I keep it at the lowest level of snark because it gets really quite obnoxious at the higher levels.
And that's assuming that they know what's really going to happen. there's still that element of, well, we were going to get those 25 inches of rain, but it just missed us. The storm just turned.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a guess, but they get pretty all. So one of the things that's also interesting about Carrot is that it lets you pick your weather source. So there's a lot of different sources of all the actual data, and I've always preferred dark sky, which Apple bought, and so that remains one of the sources. But if you prefer AccuWeather or Weather Underground or whatever, those are all possibilities as well. You get to pick, which is kind of fun.
But I read once that everything comes from the National Weather Service to start with.
Yeah,
and then each company disseminates it the way they want.
Well, they also run their own models and modify. Plus, for the local stuff, like Weather Underground in particular, like they have, if people can set up their own independent weather stations and connect them to Weather Underground, and then Weather Underground will use their local data in making predictions and saying what's happening where. So that's kind of the thing. And a WeatherBug put like stations on schools, for instance. I think they would do deals with the schools like, hey, we'll put this on and you can use it in your science classes. So yeah, that's how a lot of the hyperlocal stuff comes from, because the National Weather Service doesn't have that much hyperlocal.
Good example of that is when you see the various tracks when they're predicting where hurricanes are going to go, the European model and all the other models. Yeah. I'm sure they're all working off the same core data, but as you said, it's how they're interpreting it and end up with those different tracks. And it's the same way for all weather versus who's analyzing
it. And I swear, sometimes, those of us, I'm a runner and I run on a bike, so I'm outside a lot and I care fairly deeply about the weather. So I'm always looking at the maps and doing the animations to see where things are going. I sometimes think that my gut feeling is better than what the forecast will do, because I grew up here. I mean, yes, weather's changed, but I still have a feel of how it works around here. And I think sometimes their models don't quite pick up some of that, local knowledge.
Adam, how do you spell the name of that thing? Is it like the orange vegetable? Garrett?
It is exactly like the orange vegetable.
All right.
And it's a subscription one, like all of them are these days, because weather data is not free. All the companies have to buy weather data, and so there's basically no free apps other than Apple's, or free apps that have any useful data anyway. The other thing that's really interesting about Carrot, it's sort of the ultimate geek's weather app because it's completely customizable. You can completely rebuild the interface to look exactly the way you want, which is kind of fun. I mean, it can be overwhelming if you get if you don't really know what you're getting into. But its defaults are fine. But if you're like, it wastes a lot of space on this, you can often make it smaller or change the look or whatever. So it's kind of fun that way too.
So you can make it sunny every day.
No, but it's very self-congratulatory when it's sunny. So let's see if I pull it up right now. It's telling me, oh yeah, sometimes it has jokes. How do you fix a broken pumpkin? With a pumpkin patch. So there's here we go. As a reward for good behavior, I have generated a pleasant day for you. So this is the lowest level of snark. As I said, it really does get pretty vulgar at higher levels. So
how does it monitor your behavior?
Now it's an iPhone. We all know this.
Somebody's always watching. Come on.
Always watching. Yeah, if it's not good behavior, then
There was an app that tried to do that. It would basically, I think it would watch your tweets to try to determine what your mood was, and if you were getting too dark, it would warn you.
So the very first thing that did that was many years ago. Eudora added what Steve Joiner called a flame warning. And you would write a message, and it would look for certain words in your message, and it would assign it chili peppers. to indicate how likely it was to cause a flame war. And so this was the very first time when I was like, yeah, you might not want to send that. That's 3 chili peppers, so you're going to regret that one.
We always used to joke about that. Write the most scathing email you want in rebut to something, and then delete it.
Yeah, always best. Always best.
Just to get it off your chest.
You will regret it otherwise.
Yeah.
Or at least hold it for 24 hours before you send it.
Yeah.
Well, what else do we need to any other top of the hour stuff we need to get out of the way, or should we?
Well, we're talking about some of the news and
news. Right.
There was a couple of interesting things that Apple has done recently. They bought a classical music streaming service, PrimePhonic.
Yeah.
One of the criticisms of the Apple Music has always been the lack of classical music, and especially the organization of classical music. It's one of the weird types of music where the same song might have hundreds of versions from different composers, different orchestras. It might be a 500-year-old piece of music that's been played 1,000 times. And so classical has been often tricky to try to categorize. And iTunes over the years has added more ID3 tags, the tags in the file, to try to help determine where a music can go. So you have a composer field now. You have an album artist in addition to an artist. So you might have an album that has a bunch of different songs from different people on it. So you have a different album artist. And so they've been trying to do that. But it is kind of neat that they acquired this classical source to have more classical music. And the other thing they announced is lossy music is now available for streaming in the Apple Music, and the
lossless
music. So the MP3s and even the better quality AACs we've been listening to for years are lossy. Throws away bits of the music it doesn't think you'll miss, usually the highs and the lows. And the sort of the joke is that a generation of kids have grown up listening to crappy MP3s on tiny earbuds and don't know what real music sounds like. And so there's all these flame wars about lossless music, and I can't tell the difference. This MP3 is just fine. Well, it's because you've been listening to crap for years. But there are purists that do like to have the lossless music, the Apple lossless codec. You can set your iTunes app to rip CDs in lossless already. You generally get about a 50% compression with lossless, where MP3 got you a 90% compression. So that was one of the big advantages, 20 years ago. It's hard to imagine iTunes is 20 years ago, that you could fit so many songs on an iPod because it can compress it so good. And then they switched to the better quality AAC, the advanced audio codec from Dolby Labs. And now with Apple lossless, you get even better quality. It's 44K 16 kilohertz CD quality audio. And then they have a higher tier you can subscribe to, which is 192K, I think it was, that if you want the higher quality music. The irony is that none of Apple's Bluetooth headphones, even the $550 AirPod Max, are capable of playing lossless music, because Bluetooth is not capable of the bandwidth of lossless music. It was designed for keyboards and mice, low bandwidth, low power, and then people started making music out of it, which is fine for MP3s. But now when you want to do lossless, you have to have a really good wired speaker or wired headphones. And frequently you need a separate DAC, a digital audio converter, especially for your phone to play the higher quality versions, because the DAC in your phone or your computer may not be enough to play the super high quality versions. So it's, the irony is that you can have this lossless music and then don't listen to it on your Bluetooth headset.
One of the interesting things that Apple said in regard to that PrimePhonic announcement was that sometime in the next 6 months, they're actually going to be releasing a new app for classical music specifically. So I think there's a little bit of an acknowledgement that the music app, just even with all the extra ID3 tags you were talking about, just isn't designed for classical. And it may be too hard to redesign music for classical and other types of things. They're just going to do a new app, which will be kind of interesting to see how they do that for.
Wonder if it will be the Prime Phonic app.
Probably starting from there, yeah.
It's been done before, yeah.
Yeah.
With iTunes, for
Neil,
instance, which was SoundJam to start.
Yeah. Who was it? Was it Neil Young that did the Pono player years ago? He tried to start a new music streaming service that was only lossless, but it required its own special player because the iPod couldn't do lossless at the time, and that pretty well tanked.
And then Jay-Z was it Jay-Z who did Tidal?
Yeah, I think Tidal.
Yeah.
Had one, but they charge extra for it.
Yeah.
And there were rumors that Spotify was going to release a lossless tier that would charge you extra. And then when Apple came out and said free, the joke is Spotify went, oh okay, free.
Another monetization stream down the tube.
Yeah. I posted a link in the Zoom chat for the Apple lossless in iOS. You need iOS 14.6 or later to be able to do it on your phone, and Mac OS 11.4 or later.
Yeah, it's pretty specific.
So pretty recent versions of the OS. And if you want to play something higher than 48 kilohertz, you need an external DAC. Ironically, the Apple TV can play it without needing an extra DAC, but you have to have a high enough quality HDMI cable, and your speakers have to support the high-res lossless rates. So even if your device can do it, your speakers have to have that ability too.
I've just actually been spending a whole lot of time. I was telling Chuck very briefly before the meeting, I've been spending a ton of time messing with audio on my Mac because my speakers died. I have Altec Lansing FX6201 speakers, two speakers here and a subwoofer, and they died after 15 years. I mean, come on. Yeah, I'm annoyed, so I want to replace them, but it's going to take me a while to figure that out. But I did discover something really interesting, which I hadn't known before. I have an iMac here, 27-inch iMac, and a 27-inch Thunderbolt display here. They both have speakers in them. And so it turns out, using a utility that is built into macOS called Audio Midi Setup, you can create a multi-device output that combines multiple sets of speakers.
I'm using that right now to merge the YouTube video with the OBS video with my microphone.
Excellent. There we go. So anyway, it was one of those things where you run into all sorts of interesting stuff. But I won't say shocked. I was interested to see that Apple had provided this really kind of tweaky tool. Hasn't been updated in ages in any significant way, I don't think. But
there's probably one person that wrote it, and it's not there anymore.
Well, I'm going to be curious if they change it, because the Apple Style Guide has explicitly deprecated the term master. And yet it uses master everywhere for the master speaker. I got to
change it to primary and secondary.
I'm going to be really curious if they do that. I'll have to mention that in my article. We'll see if they're going to update it for the Style Guide. So,
so could I do it on two monitors?
Yep.
I got two external monitors on my iMac.
Yep. As long
the
as
monitors have speakers in them, yeah.
As long as they show up in the sound preferences pane as outputs in the Audio Midi Setup, you'll find it in Applications/Utilities.
Oh,
so if you're using the headphone jack on your computer to drive the audio, then it probably won't. But if the speakers in the monitors have their own USB output, then they probably would.
Uh-huh.
So and if you wait just a couple of days, will be an article in TidBITS about it. So
okay, that's good.
Well, I think you can also accomplish that with SoundSource from Rogue Amoeba. I think you can combine. I know you can direct sound to specific places,
per app.
But I'm not.
I don't think you can combine them. And the reason why I say that in part is because I asked Paul Kafassis of Rogue Amoeba to edit my article, and he didn't say, "Hey, you could have done this in SoundSource."
Oh,
Well, you do need SoundSource, though, and the reason is that SoundSource is a great little utility for audio stuff. When you make a multi-device output, you can't control it with the system volume keys, or with the just the volume slider in the sound output pane. And I think what they're thinking is that you're controlling like external speakers that have their own controls. But SoundSource has a little checkbox you can tweak in its preferences that gives you that feature back. And so all of your keys work again for being able to control volume and mute and things like that. So, it was a fascinating article to write. I mean, I learned a bunch of stuff that I didn't know, and I said you can all read it in a day or two.
Yeah, I've used Audio Hijack for a while when I needed to grab audio from one program and feed it into another program.
Yeah.
Those Amigas in their, they changed their logo. I haven't been to their website in a while. They used to be an Amiga with an AK.
Yeah, they just, after one of the shootings, they decided this was no longer funny.
Yeah. Although the O in Rogue is a target.
Yeah. Yeah, that was their concession to the old style. I remember when they changed it, and it was because it was one of those things where it's just one of those one of the mass shootings happened, and they're just like, oh, we can't do this anymore. It was amusing, 20 years ago when they started. So
political correctness strikes again.
Well, cringeworthiness strikes again.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, no one was making them do it. They just felt terrible. So, well, the other big news. I don't know if people saw this. If you talked about this last time, I don't know if you had a chance. Actually, the whole Apple detecting child sexual abuse material. When Apple said, "Oh, we're going to delay that."
What I find, I guess, most annoying is that people don't understand what it's doing.
No.
And how it's doing it. It's on your phone only. It's not Apple doing it. And Google and Facebook already are doing this. And no one seems to care. But Apple said they would do it, and everyone got upset.
Yeah. No, we wrote about this a bunch in TidBITS, both trying to explain the technology in 2 articles, and then when they canceled it, I was making the comment that a great deal of the media coverage was tremendously uninformed and inaccurate, and therefore, and it's like there's legitimate criticisms of this. Don't get me wrong. There's all sorts of questions to ask, and they're good questions to ask, but they have to be based on the reality of what Apple said, not on hearsay. And so much of what people was like, oh, Apple's scanning your photos. No, they're not. You cannot use the term Apple is scanning your photos. That phrase is inaccurate in multiple ways. And so, so much of what was written about it just wasn't based on good information. So, but we'll see. I mean, it's all back up in the air, and the 2 possibilities that I see is, sometime next year they'll come out with something that either hopefully has a much better story behind it and solves some of the legitimate criticisms, or it might just quietly disappear. It's happened before.
For the first time somebody tries to sue Apple for allowing child pornography on their phone, see, we could have stopped that, but you got mad at us.
Yeah. So,
well, there was one article out there that said, and this is controversial to say the least, that the iPhone was the child pornographer's phone of choice because of the security. That because it could not be tracked. Either. So it's sort of damning with some kind of weird praise, but that's why they picked it.
So here's the question, which no one has asked that I've seen, which I think is the most interesting question of the whole lot of it, is what do we as a society think about a device that is both monitoring for and reporting criminal activity taken by the user? Because that's what's happening. I mean, but they're not scanning your photos. But if you were to have known illegal CSAM, was called, on your phone, and this is known. I mean, they're not matching against random other new things. It's only known stuff. And you uploaded that to iCloud Photos. That's when if you did enough of it, then you would be reported to Apple. They would verify, and then it could be reported to law enforcement. So, I mean, that's very, very specific, and there were lots of safeguards built in. But in essence, at a very core level, how is that different than your car tattling on you for speeding?
One of the things that we've started hearing is in every accident, the first thing the police do is subpoena your texting records. Yep. To see if you were texting or not. And then the defense attorney, for whoever you hit, wants to know if you were texting or not, so they can get more damages out of you. Sure. And there was the famous hot tub murder a few years ago. Did you hear about that? So there was a murder.
Staying away from Rochester, man.
Yeah, well, I don't think it was in Rochester. So somebody got killed in a house, and the smart water meter showed that 300 gallons of water was used at 3 a.m. So they think they tried to flush the evidence down the hot tub drain and refill the hot tub. And so the police were trying to subpoena the Amazon Echo records. Sorry for anyone who had just triggered Alexa. Go to sleep. So that they could see if. So the joke is whoever was being murdered was saying, "Hey, I'm getting killed by Joe."
Well, and what's different about this one, and why I consider it so interesting, is that there actually are a couple of technologies built into actually mostly printers that they're not monitoring, but they can be used to identify a crime. So, for instance, color laser printers print a pattern of essentially invisible yellow dots that identify the printer uniquely. And this is designed to prevent counterfeiting. That these things are so good that they can print such high quality now that you could, in fact, print money. And so that's why this has been built in. And but again, so that's it's in essence tattling on you, but only if like someone knows to look. Whereas what's different about this technology that Apple proposed is that it would actually literally report you. It wouldn't be a matter of them discovering that there was some child pornography, some child sexual abuse materials here, and we can trace that back to you. No, this is literally is reporting on you for having uploaded these things. And I'm still really working out in my head what I think about a private corporation, acting as a policeman.
One of the things is so odd about this is how Apple talks about security all the time and privacy all the time, and now they come out with this, and I think this is going to hurt Apple.
And it has.
The intent was to be more private.
Yes,
we want to. We want to keep your phones private by making sure you don't have any of this bad.
No. Well, so there's doing the matching for CSAM wasn't designed to increase privacy for users. That's literally designed to identify these illegal materials and prevent re-victimization. But the technique that Apple proposed, which is really, really complicated and extremely cool, that was designed to increase the amount of privacy while still doing this. So, for instance, if you upload to Google Photos or you upload photos to Facebook, all of those are being scanned for CSAM, and they just are. I mean, and to give you an idea of the amount of it, Facebook last year reported, and this is required by law, if you are one of these providers, they reported 20 million pieces of this stuff uploaded to Facebook in 2020. So, I mean, this is kind of a problem. I mean, this is not a little thing. And so so Facebook, no, you got no privacy whatsoever. Google Photos, no privacy whatsoever. Google was much smaller. They were only like 500,000. So even Apple does do some of this scanning because they're required to, but it's only right now in outgoing email. And so Apple had 265 reports in 2020. So, an order, however many orders of magnitude different from Facebook. But it gives you an idea of kind of what's going on. And so Apple just said, like, we're going to do this, but we're going to do it in this really privacy protecting way. And then they introduced it in the most bungled fashion you can imagine. I mean, Apple did the worst possible PR job on this, which is why they've taken. You're absolutely correct, Ken. That this is that they've taken a major reputation hit for this. And
one of the things that I don't understand necessarily, how they do this, whatever. But it just seems to me that other governments, like in China, they can say, well, you have this technology. I want you to report on activists in China. I want you to report.
That's the bigger concern, is that this could lead to other issues.
And is it going to be a backdoor to different things where now the FBI is going to say, well, before you didn't have the technology to break into phones, but now you have the technology to do this. This
is the problem with the way Apple introduced it, which is the technology really doesn't lend itself to that in any way, shape, or form. So, for instance, for China to use it, China would have to subvert both the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and at least one other child safety organization in another country. Then they would have to subvert Apple, because all that this is doing is matching existing images. So
it's a checksum. It's not the actual image.
Right. It's just a number that represents the image. So basically, it just says this number matches this other number. And if 30 of those numbers match, then it uploads previews to Apple, and some poor person at Apple has to look at them. Now, they don't know what's in them, and they don't know what they match. All they're looking for is, does it look like this is CSAM, or is this an error? So if China would have to subvert it, and let's say this is actually the best example is if China is looking for pictures of Tank Man, the guy facing down the tank in Tiananmen Square. That's a known image, so they could, in theory, subvert it into 2 or more of these child safety databases. Thus, it would end up in Apple's thing, and thus Apple would see it. But Apple's reviewers would see a guy facing down a tank. They're not going to report that to anyone unless Apple China then subverts Apple to make them report Tank Man. So by the time you've gone down this rabbit hole, you're like, well, why wouldn't they just make Apple do whatever they want? If they have that much power, why are they going through running through these hoops? They're just going to say to Apple, turn over everything or we kick you out of the country.
I think Australia and Germany just took a big hit on that too in the past couple of days.
Yeah,
I didn't see those. Yeah.
China. In fact, China did get Apple to put servers in China storing Chinese citizens' data.
iCloud photos in China
that's been common for years. A lot of companies have done that. Going back to the BlackBerry days, where they put a BBM server in all the Middle Eastern countries that wanted to prevent their citizens from speaking publicly.
Yeah, see, now they have to go to the Pegasus group and buy software to target their activists. So it's way harder.
Did you hear about Moxie Marlinspike and the Celebrite box? So Moxie Marlinspike is a very famous cryptographer. He wrote the Signal protocol that's used by a lot of messaging apps. It's basically perfect forward secrecy messaging. You cannot break it. He somehow got his hands on one of the Celebrite boxes that they sell to police to break into any phone. And the thing's got 100 dongles on it to be able to plug into any phones. He found there are so many bugs in this box that it's very easy to create a maliciously crafted file on your phone, then plug it into the box. You can read everyone else's data that's in the box. you can plant basically a time bomb so that any future phones that are read by that box can go back to the first whoever put in the thing to begin with. So suddenly this box is completely insecure, and lawyers are already demanding reviews and reopening cases because the chain of evidence is completely broken now.
Steve, what's that guy's name?
Moxie Marlinspike.
If I remember right, he actually changed it to that.
Yeah, that's his
legal name now.
Yeah,
it wasn't originally.
Can you put the spelling in the chat, please?
Yeah,
thanks.
Is it just me, or is privacy? I mean, are we all just fooling ourselves with the privacy thing? Adam, I thought your question was really interesting from the iPhone reporting to law enforcement, because insurance companies are out there offering you discounts to plug those little devices in your ODN port that will send information of all kinds about where you've been, how fast you're driving, what hours of the day you're traveling back and forth.
And at least with those, you theoretically know what you're doing.
Theoretically.
I mean, that's kind of the point of them, as opposed to the point of the iPhone is not to look for CSAM. You don't get an iPhone.
They give you a discount if you did not have that material.
Yeah, but seriously, it's. I mean, I think it's an interesting question because it gets into what are the roles of different parts of society. And does the free market simply take care of it? Okay, well, I guess I'm not getting an iPhone because, it's going to be doing this it's going to be scanning and reporting. Or do people much more likely just say, yeah, I don't have any CSAM. I'm not an illegal jerk. I'm not a criminal, so I'm not going to worry about it. And, from Apple's perspective, if they just get rid of all the criminals from their platform, that's probably a plus. I don't know.
Adam, when you talk about Facebook having 20 million of these
reports,
and have they talked about when they reported to the authorities and it turns out that it's wrong?
So those are just reports, and that means that a Facebook content moderator has determined that it is concerning in some way. They're not attempting to determine legality or anything like that. There's something it's called NCMEC, National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and they're like a government approved organization to handle this stuff because all of this material is illegal. It is illegal to possess it, is illegal to transmit it, just illegal 100%. And so what they have is something called the cyber tip line. And that allows anyone, individuals even, if you were emailed something, you could submit it to the cyber tip line. But what they call electronic service providers, so Apple, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, anyone who runs a service where stuff is uploaded, they're legally required, if they're aware of it, to report it. And what NCMEC does is then evaluate it at that point and determine if something else needs to happen. I don't know what the process once something ends up in NCMEC is. I know what Apple said was going to happen, because what Apple's technology was doing was only identifying known stuff, whereas what Facebook and Google and everyone else are doing here is identifying potential stuff.
Right. But my question basically is, if it's reported, something is reported to the authorities, right? Now you have somebody who's being investigated, but have they, has any statistics been brought out that it was actually a bogus CSAM or whatever?
There was one in that Facebook report. I'm trying to find it again. Of the 20 million reports, it said how many people were arrested from it.
Oh, interesting.
So there must have been valid reports.
Right. Yeah, and the link that from Google that you just posted is really interesting, because I actually said it was like the number of reports from Google was relatively low, it was lower, but the number of pieces of content was high because the number of they're reporting multiple pieces at once. I mean, one of the things that this is something I touched on when we first started writing about it, is that I want to say, like, us normal people, we don't think about this on a regular basis. Like, I don't, as far as I know any, children who have been sexually abused, and certainly had materials, video or photo materials taken of them. I like, this has never intersected my life in any way, shape, or form. And so, yet, when you talk to people who deal with this world, it's just horrible. I mean, it's one of those things where, one of the guys on TidBITS Talk, he was actually in upstate New York here, Buffalo and Syracuse. He was a minister, and he worked with a lot of at-risk teens. And he said, the things that he saw on a daily basis were just horrible. And we're lucky that we don't have to see that sort of stuff. But I think that's why these organizations exist. That's why these technologies are being brought up, because it is a problem and it is affecting large numbers of people, just not the ones we're running into on our, hopefully everyone ends up in in this sort of world where this doesn't happen. But I think a lot of us, we just don't see it. So I guess what I'm trying to say.
Adam, straighten this out for me, because I thought maybe early on in the coverage that it was not that Apple was going to be reporting this to law enforcement, but they were going to be reporting it to one of the centers for CSAM.
So Apple does not report to the law enforcement. Apple reports to NCMEC. But basically the likelihood, honestly, so Apple does two things. First, they shut down the iCloud account. So if you've got more than 30 pieces of matching of photos that match known illegal photos, so you've got your collection of CSAM, and you've uploaded to iCloud photos such that it's matched, and Apple has identified it, and Apple's human reviewer has determined that yes, this is CSAM. They send it over to NCMEC. But then you're kind of, they kind of got you. I mean, NCMEC's going to go to law enforcement with that, because this is just illegal.
It only reports it when you upload to iCloud. Right. So if you keep it on your phone, you're never reported.
As long as you don't actually upload, if you don't turn on iCloud photos, it's not in any way intersecting with you.
In the next part of our conversation with Adam Engst and the Apple CIDER user group, we get into the iPhone 13, have a broader discussion about privacy and the effects of CSAM and Apple's proposals on that, exploding batteries, and a few other things. That's next time on MacVoices. I hope you'll join us. Until then, as always, I'm Chuck Joiner. Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices, or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you MacVoices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.